Hey everybody, it's Rob Scheer, the founder of Comfort Cases and the host of Fostering Change. Wow, it's so hard to believe that we've wrapped up season 5. You know, I am absolutely still in just the awe for the third year in a row to be voted the #1 podcast in foster care and adoption. You know what? It's summertime and it's time to take a break. But the thing that I absolutely love is we get to do the best of during the summer break. You know, this was a real hard one because we only have 6 episodes that we will be airing. So when my team got together, you know, we listened again to podcasts, you know, I skimmed through books again. These are the next 6. And by the way, for any of all the other episodes and all my other guests, and I traveled all over the country, I've interviewed so many people, read so many books, I want to say thank you. You're all the best of. And so this was a really, really hard choice. I hope you all enjoy this interview. Have a great day.
Well, you know, it's hard to believe that May is almost over, you know, Foster Care Awareness Month. You know, I say this every single year. The fact is that I will take a month if that's what you're going to give us. But, you know, in my world, foster care is something that's talked about on a daily basis. It's something that we think about on a daily basis. And as an organization that is international, we try to continue to push that needle. And in my next guest, I have to tell you, I'm a little bit shocked that I actually am having my next guest on, because let me tell you, first of all, I do consider him a friend, and he became a friend of mine a while back. We were introduced by a mutual friend, actually my manager, and Benjy actually is in the music world. So when I found out, as I follow him on social media, and he's not one of these guys that brags or talks, but he had gotten his certificate to be a CASA, I immediately reached out to him and said, Benjy, you got to be on Fostering Change. So Benjy, welcome to Fostering Change.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You know,
It's
this
great
is
to be
like, it's so full circle. I mean, here you are, you're the CEO and founder of a record company, Rostrum Record.
Mhm.
You are a dad to a beautiful little girl.
And boy.
And boy, that's right, a boy and a
Yeah.
girl. And then
Yes.
all of a sudden, so here you're running this record company. You've got these 2 young toddlers, but you had this yearning to be a CASA. How did that happen?
Well, I think I've always wanted to figure out how I can help, right? And after moving to Los Angeles about 8 years ago, and Los Angeles is such obviously a big city, but has such a huge foster care system and a huge amount of children that are involved with the system, that it felt, you know, like, man, like this is really an issue. Like, how can I help? And so we started doing smaller things like, you know, giving donations and helping out where we could. Um, we got involved with the Children's Law Center and did some stuff with them. Those are that's the group of attorneys that represent the children in court. Um, and but no one told me about CASA. In all of my, you know, exploration, if you will, of like, how can I help? Um, no one mentioned CASA. And one day I'm driving down the street and there was a little billboard that said, like, you know, that mentioned the CASA program. And I'm like, how come no one told me about this? And so I looked it up, and it was like, you know, this is perfect for me in that, look, I have a young family, I have a growing business, you know, my wife and I have talked about potentially fostering or adopting in the future, you know, but this felt like a great middle ground where I could be hands-on, get to know one child really well, and hopefully make a difference in his or her life. And I just decided to jump right in.
So, I mean, that is absolute. First of all, the fact that, you know, and by the way, you and I have had the foster care talk many, many times, and I can't believe I never brought up CASA to you. And you know, the crazy part is so when I adopted, when our first 4 children arrived, they didn't have CASA. CASA wasn't in the DC area. Even though CASA was around, it was just popping up in states, but it's been around forever. You know, but the craziest thing is I just did a packing party for Comfort Cases with CASA, and CASA receives a I mean, thousands of our cases, because to me, they're the first contact. You know, one of the questions that I have is when you decided you did your research, and by the way, you had educated yourself about the foster care system. There had to be something as you were learning and you know getting your certificate to be a CASA that you really didn't know. What was that one thing that stood out that you didn't know about foster care?
Um, you know what? I don't think I quite understood the amount of bias in the foster care system, you know, which you are no stranger to, you know, to understanding all of that. But a lot of our CASA training revolved around, you know, bias training, understanding, you know, different perspectives. And while I already understood, you know, to a large degree understood different perspectives, I didn't quite understand to the degree to which it affected the foster care system, the children that entered it, the reasons why, you know, those particular children were in the foster care system. And so that was a big eye opener, you know, I think for me. And they really did a good job at sort of surrounding and giving context to that, even so far as, you know, one of our case studies that we talked about was a trans child, and and it went into a lot of issues very specific, you know, to that child and to how, you know, and this is a made up
Right.
case study, you know, it was potentially based on, you know, a real case, but obviously they changed names and changed all sorts of stuff and, you know, to make it more of a case study. And, you know, the fact that one parent didn't understand, you know, why the child wanted to change, and, you know, and another one was supportive and having problems in school and, you know, all that stuff. And it gave you know, it gave a lot of different perspectives, and also just opened your eyes to a lot of different things that maybe you didn't think about. I think some people think, oh, well, I'm going to be a CASA, and, you know, it's just going to be all warm and
Right.
cuddly and lovely, and, you know, not cuddly, but like, you know,
No,
warm,
I totally know what
you
you're
know.
thinking. The same thing
Yeah.
is the same thing when it comes to foster parents. You know, I mean, there's so much misguided information. And when it comes to being a foster parent, I mean, even though it had been 15 years since my husband and I took our classes to become foster parents, I've just recently was at a foster parent association, and I was surprised as I was sitting in these classes, you know, waiting for my turn to come up and speak, to hear the way that you know we're still not educating ourselves about a lot of the trauma that the kids have. You know, as a parent, you know, hearing them talk that way about this particular case study, you know, here you have this child, and by the way, you know, everybody can send me whatever emails they want to, you know, trans kids deserve love as well, and this is not a choice, you know, as just as me married to my husband, not a choice.
Right,
But
right, right.
as a parent, though, I have to say, Benji, it probably hits you a little differently than a lot of the single people that I know that are CASAs. Because by the way, you are the first married person with children, and I know hundreds of CASAs that is married, has kids, and that you're a CASA.
You know what, that's interesting. And now thinking back to my class, it does seem like just about everyone was a single person, you know, not that we got too deep into each other's lives, but, you know, but yeah, that's really interesting. It's moving to LA coincided with having our first child, and that definitely made me more sensitive to what these other children are going through, because and it made me want to get involved. It's like, you know, as any, you know, human being would hopefully have, you know, sort of feelings towards these children and, you know, want to help and this, that, and the other. After having my own kids, and in particular, you know, when we had Izzy, that being our first child, it really kind of changed my sentiment towards the whole thing and made it that much more, I'm having trouble explaining it, but it made it made me even more sensitive to
Yeah,
it.
no, I get
Um,
it. I get it. It was the sensory of seeing, having your own child per se, and knowing that there's another child out there, that even the fact that you're looking at the fact you've got two parents and one is like, I can't accept this. The other one is like, we have to accept this. And,
mm,
you talk about the bias part, and this is the thing that truly is something that I literally stay up at night because I know for a fact that 64% of the kids who enter our foster care system, they enter because of the one word, which is neglect.
mm,
And we know that neglect is more or less in poverty. We know that if a family of color, and I use this example all the time because it was in the news, where the white mother who wasn't able to buy formula and called 911, and she's in Ohio in the rural areas, and the police officer brings the formula and everybody just raves, and he's in People magazine and he's on the Today Show, and everybody just thinks this is he's a hero. He brought this mother of five, she's single, formula. And then literally
right.
6 months after that, a woman in Harlem who actually worked two jobs raising her one daughter who was 5 years old. Um, she was reading her a book on the couch and she fell asleep. And the little 5-year-old girl got out of her apartment and went downstairs, and she was going to go across the street to her Grammy's house. And a police officer picked her up. And instead of the police officer saying, honey, where do you live? Let's go knock on your door. He stuck her into a police car. He took her down to the police station. He called child welfare. Child welfare took the daughter, put her in foster care. It took the mother almost a year to get her back. Okay. This was a story in the New York Times, a year to get
Yeah.
her back. And the principal said afterwards, that little girl has never been the same. And I'm telling you something, that's the
Mhm.
bias that we are seeing, and what I
Yes.
think that we need to do, and I'm hoping that this is the track that you're seeing CASA, because I've spoke to many CASAs and I've had them on my podcast, is that I truly believe that the CASA is there for the child, but the CASA also needs to be there for the family as well. And to
Mm.
see, really look into it. You're out standing outside, you're not a guardian of litem, you're not, the social worker, you're not the judge who only sees a folder. You're really seeing the intertwines of this family, and how quickly we can get that child back to their birth parents.
Yeah, no, that was one of the reasons, one of the additional reasons I wanted to be a CASA was also to just learn more, like learn more about how the system works, learn more from whether it's the parents or the resource family or the caseworker, or just by observing in the court hearings and understand additional ways that I can be helpful, right? Like I'm happy to help in this one case and it's very important. And it's much more hands-on. But how can I be more helpful sort of across the board? Obviously it's the system is the system works in some cases, the system is broken in other cases, or in other parts of the system, and kind of trying to figure out, how can I use our resources or just our creativity to try to come up with additional solutions that can help not just one child, but many in the future, or to help avoid the type of situation that you talked about from that article, which is just awful. Um, and just being a parent, the
Yeah.
idea of that is just like tears at your heart. Um, but yeah, I think going back to an earlier point, like when I started having children, um and I realized how much love and resources were around our children, right? From
Yeah.
obviously, um, myself, my wife, Ellen, grandparents, community members, people from our school. Um, that it made me particularly sensitive that not all children have that, and many children don't have that. And I think that's, in part what, made me extra sensitive to try to help in some fashion.
Yeah,
And, but it's baby steps, right? Like you have
of
to,
course, of
you have to
course.
learn, you have to, we met, and I love, doing what I can to help comfort cases, and then I learned about CASA, and then so I'm doing CASA. It's just like, figuring out more, learning more, getting more involved as much as I can. And, and I'm hopeful that at some point it leads to being more helpful across the board.
Yeah, one of the things with CASA, and it's been a longstanding rule for national CASA, and I bring this up to every CASA that I speak to, is that one of the things that they talk about is that once the child is reunified with their birth parents, the CASA is to go away. And I have been very vocal with CASA, national, that I feel that that is another disservice that we do to kids in foster care.
Mm,
I'm a true believer that reunification is what every single goal should be. But I also am
yeah.
a true believer that you build a stronger child by having surround them with as much love as they possibly could be. So I think that we are doing a disservice to a child when, all of a sudden a kid is in foster care for 18 months, 2 years, some 3 years, and all of a sudden they're reunified with their birth parents. They have no more contact with the foster parents, and they've been living in that house for 3 years. They have
Yeah.
no more contact with the CASA worker, who has been in their life for, 2 or 3 years. I feel like that we can do that better, and we can, instead of, that's why I always say, instead of fostering a child, we foster a family. Um,
Mm,
and when a child comes into the system, well, the first thing that we should do is we all should come to the table. The CASA worker, the guardian ad litem, the social worker, the biological parents, the foster parents, and all sit and talk about what do we do to get Johnny back to their birth parents? What is
mm,
everything that we can do? Do you need a ride to drug rehab? Let me take you there. Do you need, a ride to go find yourself a job? Let me help you with that. Whatever we can do. And when these kids see, oh my gosh, look at all these people that love me,
mm,
there's so much more that they have potential to do than when, instead of being ripped away from everybody. Could that get brought up
yeah.
at all during your training?
No, I mean, the CASAs that we met, some of them mentioned that, even though either the child was reunified or is now in their 20s, or, what have you, that they still are in contact, they still get together every once in a while. I don't believe I don't know the rules of whether, what's mandated and what's not, but it seems like the CASAs that have a really great connection with their youth seem to,
Love
you
that.
know, yeah, seem to continue on, which I think is really special. I hope, and I'm not knowledgeable enough to say that there's like some rule that you can't stay in touch. That would be awful. But I think it's up to the child and to the CASA, if they want to continue that relationship, they should. And that the CASA should be encouraged to do so, because we all know that at 18 or at 21, you're still not a fully developed person. You
Yeah.
still need that love and support. I'm 46. I still need love and support,
I get you. Hey,
Uh,
57, and let me tell you something. I wouldn't survive. I mean, I look at my son who's now 23, and he came when he was 18 years old. And I look at him and know that he needs the love and support.
right.
Sad part is he was the only one of my children who actually did come with a CASA. And
Mm,
as soon as he came into our house and we filed the adoption papers, the CASA never came back, never called,
Mm,
never. And so that was a little bittersweet for me, just
yeah,
because, he was new to the family and, but I also think that he really was needing that separation from the system per se to now
yeah,
and having his forever family.
yeah.
So
No, absolutely.
when are you going to meet your first kid?
We have met, technologically met, via, I obviously can't talk
Of
too
course.
much, or I don't want to talk too much about him, but before making contact, so I got assigned the day I graduated. Like
Wow.
that's how many kids are waiting for CASAs. Is we were at CASA graduation and my new CASA supervisor, because everyone has a supervisor,
Right,
right?
right.
This is your first time doing this, you have questions. What do I do here? This court hearing's coming up. What am I supposed to do? And they're very, very helpful. And so I met my supervisor the day I graduated, um, at the ceremony. And she's like, you have an email now that you have graduated in your inbox that is, the background information on the kid you've been assigned to. And I was like, well, that was fast, and so yeah, and so it was um it was suggested that I reach out to the resource parent first,
Right.
just to get a little bit of the lay of the land and figure out the best way to make contact, because I also didn't want to just like out of nowhere be like, hey, I'm Benjy, like I'm your cousin, and they're like, what are you,
Let's
who
go to
are
the
you?
movies. I'm Benjy.
Right. Yeah, so we had a good, really, really good conversation, and his suggestion was like, he's really much more open on text than on anything.
Yeah.
So why don't you try to text him first? And so that's how we've started, kind of starting to get to know each other.
I think that's with all kids these generations. Even my own kids, my
Right.
my my youngest son who's 15 was in his bedroom last night and I'm trying to get his attention. So I text him and sure enough, he replies back to his dad like that. So I think that's all.
Right, right.
The
Yeah.
fact is that I have to tell you, Benji, I've always been just I think the world of you, your wife, your kids. But if you were
Thanks.
standing in a room right now with 40 people and 40 people who said, I want to do something, I just don't know what to do. And that I hear all the time. Um, would you tell them to be a CASA?
100%. Yes, I would. I think that being a CASA is such a great way of getting involved, helping a child, learning the system as much, as much as possible. It's a vast system. So, and things are different in different states, et cetera. But within your own community, getting to understand how this works, how you can be helpful. And there's a lot of kids that need CASAs, that there aren't enough CASAs for the amount of kids whose caseworkers have suggested or put in a request for a CASA. So they're waiting, and 100%. I think that there are ways to get involved, um, but this is just a great hands-on way to do it. There's a bit of training involved. We had 6 weeks of Zoom classes. The Zoom classes were 3 hours a week. So there is a time commitment, but it's
What
worth
an
it.
investment. I mean, 3 hours. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
I mean.
yeah. No, and so I think it's important, and I think it's a great thing. And as I learn more and more programs, I don't claim to know all the programs out there and all the different ways to get involved. But even though I'm early in my CASA journey, I think, and it's funny you mentioned that, because it's also one of the other things. It's like, I want to help a child. I want to help understand the system better. But if I went through the training and I started being a CASA and I felt it was, worthwhile, which I assumed it was, and I'm now telling you that it is, to spread the word,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which is why I'm so grateful that you invited me on your podcast, because it's getting to spread the word that, like, this is a program that you can join and that you can really be helpful.
Yeah, I love the fact, that, with the CASA, I mean, people think that, first of all, the myth that these kids are bad is wrong. It's not true.
Right.
I feel that, there's no such thing as a bad child. It's only a child that needs to be redirected, and
Mhm.
truly be shown that they are truly loved and they're worthy. And the fact that, this isn't a 40-hour week job to be a CASA, and people need to understand that. Listen up,
Right.
everybody. I say it all the time. If you can change a child's life for just one day, what an impact that you make. And the old saying where you invest in a child, you invest in their future is not true. When you invest in a child, you actually invest in my future. You invest in Benjy's future. You invest in so
Mhm.
many other people's future because they are our leaders of tomorrow. And for those of you who come to me every week and you say, what can I do? I'm telling you what you can do. You can find your local CASA and you can become a CASA because you can truly make a difference. Benjy, I just want to say thank
Yeah.
you.
Well,
We are going
thank
to be
you.
plastering this all over our social media platforms
I'll
because
help.
I
I'll
do
help.
think that this is something that we need to talk more about. And what I would love to do is I'd love to have you come back in like a year and I really want
Yeah.
to talk about it. And because I think it's a really good thing for people to hear the journey and they need to hear, because let me tell you, I've spoken to CASAs before and they said it took them 6 months for the child that they received to even speak to them. And
Yeah.
that might happen because these
Yeah.
kids have gone through a lot of trauma. They have gone through a lot of disappointment, a lot of people letting them down. And the one
Yeah.
thing that I can say that I love about CASA is that it's the consistency. It's the consistency. So if that
Yeah.
kid is moved to another home, I met a kid just recently, been in 7 homes. And so, but the one thing that they had the same CASA, the one
Yes.
consistency. So if someone asked me what the definition of CASA is, even though I know it's a court-appointed special advocate, to me, the definition of CASA is consistency because that's what you
Hmm.
truly give a child. Benjy, thank you so
Yeah.
much. And everybody, this
Thank
is the
you.
way we end National Foster Care Awareness Month. You've learned so much this month, so many things that you can do, so many different ways that you can truly help mold the future of a child who has entered our foster care system. And then we all should understand any child that enters the system has entered the system because of a choice that someone else made, a choice that
Mm.
someone else made. And now you have the opportunity to make the choice of how are you going to make the difference? And I think it is become a CASA. Until next time, this is Rob Shearer at Fostering Change. Continue to be good humans. Take care.